forge, hammer, anvil, a vise, an assortment of hand tools. That's the place to start when you're getting into blacksmithing. But what if you're thinking about getting into some bigger equipment, you want to expand your capabilities, maybe make life a little bit easier on aging muscles and joints? Maybe you're looking at some sort of big equipment. Personally, I've been acquiring tools for over 40 years, and the acquisition of tools and trying out new things is part of what brings me joy in the blacksmith shop. I enjoy doing that, even though I don't strictly need a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of fun to work with, a lot of fun to research and try new things, make tooling for. So I have acquired quite a bit. But if you're just thinking about your first tool, what is it you want? Do you need a fly press, a treadle hammer, a power hammer, a hydraulic press? What kind of power hammer? There's lots of different power hammers out there. Which one would I choose if I could only have one and I was just getting started? Don't know if I'll be able to answer that question definitively. It's a pretty subjective question. But let's start with the fly press. Fly press has the big advantage that it is a manual tool. You don't need any power. A lot of people have power in their shop, but it's somewhat limited. It's maybe a single 20 amp breaker or something like that. You can't run big presses, big power hammers off of that. So a fly press that is a manual tool might be just the way to go. That also means you're not dealing with electric motors, hydraulic pumps, things like that, that might be a little bit more high maintenance. What a fly press really excels at is controlled bending, and you can do just about anything you want depending on the tooling you make for the fly press. You can do offset bends, you can do straightening, you can bend circles on this if you want to, if you got the right tooling and incremental bending. You can make a pretty good ring roller out of this thing. With a bottom swedge and a ball tool, this is outstanding for pressing coffee scoops, ladles, small dishes, things like that. You don't need big power of a hydraulic press to do those little jobs with. I bought this fly press. I was in the middle of doing a bunch of tent stakes, and I didn't really think of the fly press as being a tool for making tent stakes. But I made this really crude, simple set of dies, put it in the fly press and tried it out. And that took that tent stake project from being long, arduous work to being something I could do quickly and efficiently. The fly press pretty well paid for itself in the few years that I was doing tent stakes on a regular basis. And this set of dies made out of mild steel has shaped thousands and thousands of tent stakes over the years. But it's not really a substitute for a power hammer. It will do some drawing out, but it isn't really very a strong tool for that. You can punch with it, but you're going to be limited to how thick and how heavy material you can punch. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all tool. But if you're doing a lot of controlled bends, sinking little dishes, coffee scoops, decorative stamping, you need to run chisel lines, all that kind of stuff, fly press is a good tool for that. A treadle hammer has some of those same advantages of the fly press in being non-electric. At least it doesn't have to be electric. I've never seen one with an electric motor, but I've seen some with a small air cylinder that takes the stress off your knees so you don't have to stomp on it every time. And that's something I don't have any experience with, but it isn't that hard to use your foot, and you operate the treadle hammer, and you can switch legs back and forth. You can even do this while seated on a stool if you need to. For most blacksmiths, this is a little bit more what you're thinking of when you're thinking of forging, because it's hammer and anvil, and you can use various tools under this. You can use the tong-held tools we looked at making recently. You can use conventional top tools on this. You can even use regular handheld chisels and punches as long as you have a positive stop. And I have a stop on this that will keep me from squishing my hand if I'm working with a chisel under this. Treadle hammer is probably better at doing drawing out than the fly press is. It's not something most people typically think of, but you can put drawing dies, which I've got in there right now, and do a little bit of drawing out under the treadle hammer if you need to. So if it's the only big tool you have, this thing is pretty darn versatile, and it really does take the place of a striker for punching, chiseling, using a flatter, set hammer, all of that kind of stuff. I really like having the treadle hammer available. I use this for stamping my touch mark all the time. For a lot of people, a power hammer is the holy grail of big equipment for the blacksmith shop. A power hammer is impressive. It's an awesome thing to work with. You can do an amazing amount of work. A new hammer like this, SAMAC 60K, is pretty darn expensive, and it's not something to be taken lightly if you're looking for one. Of course, some of the used hammers out there, if you're looking for an old Nazel or Baudry, something like that, they can run into huge amounts of money as well. So power hammers are considerably more expensive than something like the fly press or a treadle hammer, which you could actually build yourself. I built that one at the community college welding shop while we were taking welding classes, and they let me use their shop in the evenings to build pretty much whatever I wanted, and I got a grade for doing it. This is a self-contained air hammer. It has a big cylinder in the back that every time the flywheel goes around, it provides enough air to drive the hammer one time. So it's very purpose-built for what it does. It runs at a constant speed, and you can change how hard it hits based on how far you step on the treadle. It's an outstanding tool for drawing out. If you got to do a lot of drawing out, a lot of texturing, that kind of stuff, this is probably the tool you want. Well, maybe not this hammer specifically, but a power hammer excels at drawing out. You can also use a wide variety of tooling under a power hammer. Right now I have combination dies, so they've got a drawing out section and a flat section. I also have a set of larger flat dies that are really good for working with various tools, either single-sided tools or spring tools like a closed impression die can work very well under a power hammer. A power hammer of this size also requires a little bit more infrastructure. This has a 3-foot deep concrete pad under it so it remains stable. Some of the other tools simply don't need that much foundation under them. Although if you go up to really big hammers, a 250, 500 pound self-contained air hammer, some of those things need yards of concrete under them to remain stable. I'm going to jump to the far end of the line of tools here and work our way back a little bit. This is a homemade hydraulic press. This is a 24-ton press based off of Jim Batson's book on forging presses. Really good book, lots of great information. I intentionally made this one a little bit slower, thinking that I might want the reaction time if things weren't going very smooth. If I needed to stop what I was doing, run the ram back up or something like that. It runs so slow that it can be problematic. Once the dies make contact with the work is cooling off, so you don't get as much work done because it's not pressing as fast as some of the other presses out there. And if you're punching, the punch gets really hot really fast. I watched some of these videos from Coal Iron Works where they're punching a hammerhead in a single heat and doing it in only a few seconds, no glow to the punch when they're done. This one often takes me 2 or 3 heats if I keep cooling the punch so it doesn't turn red hot. And if I try to do it red hot, it's really easy to ruin a punch and overheat it, and the punch starts to bend, bow, gall, and it has some real problems. So it hasn't been the best tool in the world, still super useful for doing big heavy bends, heavy sinking, kind of like what the fly press would be used for, but on a much bigger scale. And it does punch. If I had to punch a bunch of hammer eyes, this is probably a tool I would want, even though it does not work as fast and as effective as some of the commercial hydraulic presses out there. For people doing pattern welded steel, I think this is an outstanding tool. A lot of what you do for pattern welding, welding up big billets, a hydraulic press would really be the way to go. Power hammer works pretty well for that, but I think a hydraulic press is probably the better of the two tools when it comes to that kind of work. Now, shoehorned in back here is a 25-pound Little Giant. This hammer only weighs a little over 900 pounds for the entire machine, so it's an easier machine to move around than something like the SAMAC would be, but it's fairly light. I keep drawing dies in this, and I use it pretty much exclusively for small drawing out projects, 3/8, ½ inch, maybe 5/8 inch. I'd rather draw out under this than the big hammer because it's not so much overkill, it's easier to control in those smaller amounts than the power that the big hammer has. So I like having both hammers. This one's actually Janet's hammer. It's a mechanical hammer, so it works with a flywheel and an off-center pin that controls the hammerhead, got springs in it. It's a little bit more barbaric in some ways, but it's a lot of fun to use and it's a cool old hammer. I'd hate to give it up. In Francis Whitaker's old shop, 25-pound Little Giant was the only power hammer he ever had in there, as far as I know. That brings us to the KA75. Like I say, this is the newest tool in the shop. This is a single blow striking hammer. You push down on the treadle one time and you get one blow. How hard and how far you push down on the treadle determines how hard of a blow you get. You can really finesse things with this once you get good at it, and it's been real interesting to work with it. It's not an exact replacement for a power hammer because you do have to tap your foot every single time and it doesn't cycle automatically, but it can do a whole lot that you would do under a power hammer. And if it was the only tool you had, you would use it a lot like you would use a power hammer or the treadle hammer. It's probably more related to the treadle hammer than anything else, and it's great for using tools because of that single blow capability. It's more controllable and more precise than a lot of the power hammers might be. So that brings us to the question of which tool would I recommend if you could only have one? I say that's really subjective. It depends on the kind of work you're doing. For years, I was pretty sure if I could only have one of these tools, it would be the treadle hammer. It is more of an exact replacement for having a striker in the shop. It isn't as fast or as powerful as any of the other tools, but it's pretty reliable, it's pretty controllable, and it will do a wide variety of things if you make the right tools and the right dies to go with it. You can use punches and chisels, you can put bottom tools in there. It's got a square hardy shank on the bottom. You can use closed impression dies, acorn dies, ball dies, things like that, if you're doing ornamental work. So there's lots of stuff you can do with a treadle hammer. When I did the punched holes in the gate, I did a lot of them under the treadle hammer because it was one of the more reliable ways to get an accurate result. It wasn't the fastest way, but it was easier than doing it by hand, and I had way more control over what was going on than if I was doing it under the power hammer or the hydraulic press. With the addition of the KA75, that might replace the treadle hammer because it does have more control. It is pretty powerful, so you could screw things up pretty fast with it if you're not being careful. But I also think you can turn the air pressure way down and have a little bit more finesse with it than you do with higher air pressures. So it would be really hard for me to decide right now, if I could only have one, which one would I have? Treadle hammer was also the very first big tool I had. It was not this treadle hammer, it was one I built up. The anvil was an old truck axle with the flange for the wheel as the anvil base, and I had another axle shaft for the head. It was sort of a cobbled together treadle hammer based on some pictures I had found. No plans, no instructions, but it worked, and as far as I know, it's on its third or fourth owner and still being used. Last I heard, somebody had it and was still working with that treadle hammer. So it's pretty reliable technology, and they aren't going to wear out real fast. If you build it yourself, it's something you can fix pretty easy yourself too. If I had to thin out just a little and I wasn't going to get rid of everything, the first tool I would let go would be the hydraulic press. Not necessarily any hydraulic press, but the hydraulic press that I have because it is so slow. I built that because I thought I was going to make a lot more axes and I wanted to punch axe eyes, adze eyes, get into doing hammers, all of that. And it just did not prove to be that good a tool for that because I built it so slow. Now, if I take it apart, put a bigger motor, bigger, higher speed motor in there, even with the existing pump, it would do much better. Unfortunately, the space that I left underneath it won't hold a bigger motor, so I would have to either reconfigure the entire press or find some way to put the motor outside the press, and I just haven't wanted to do that. It would certainly be an option, and I could make that press better, but the truth is, if I really get into making axes and all that kind of stuff and want to take that more seriously again, I would probably invest in a press from Cole Iron Works. I think their 16-ton press would do way better than my 24-ton press does, especially if it had the 5-horse motor on it. And I don't mean that as an endorsement, not being sponsored. It's just my own personal thoughts at the moment. Now, it'd be hard to give up the Little Giant just because it's such a cool hammer, but it does get used less than the SAMAC, and now with the KA75, the Little Giant gets used less than that. So it might be something I'd be willing to give up if I was thinning out, but it would be really tough. In an ideal world, I'd be able to have the treadle hammer, the Little Giant, the K75, but it'd be hard to give up the fly press too. Boy, I just want it all, don't I? They're all so unique and so useful, and while there's a lot of crossover, they will all work certain tooling, they can all be set up to do similar jobs. but they aren't all ideal for it. So if you want to be able to do that variety, you want to have a variety of tools. It's like having a big variety of hammers and a big variety of tongs and a variety of punches, a variety of chisels. It would be hard to start getting rid of that stuff if you had to thin out. Now, I do realize that there will come a day that I will thin this out because we won't be able to stay where we're at and we'll have to move into a smaller place. And maybe I'll have an 8 by 12 shed and that's all I can work in. And I'll have to make a big decision at that point over as far as which tools I'm going to keep. But my work would also have to shift. If I'm not doing things like this gate, I don't need as many big tools. But right now, I still want to do more work like this, so I want to have the big tools available. I would like to get back into doing axes and adzes. I would like to be able to do that efficiently enough that that becomes a saleable item for me. But right now, I'm just not really set up for it, and I don't know that I'm going to go out and invest in a new hydraulic press just to make that part of the business run a little bit smoother. So the answer to which one of these big tools you need in your shop, I can't tell you. That's really something you have to decide. Hopefully I've given you some information, some pros, some cons. The treadle hammer is probably the most accessible because you can build it yourself and you can buy one ready-made. There are a number of people out there making treadle hammers for sale. I think Blacksmith Supply sells one based on the same Clay Spencer plan mine is based off of. Blacksmith Supply also is now the dealer for the fly press that I have. Mine's a number 6 fly press, and I didn't buy mine from them, but they're now the dealer. They're also now the dealer for Samac power hammers. So if you're looking for some of this stuff, that might be a great place to look. Again, this is not being sponsored, and they did not send any of these tools out. The only tool that was provided by a manufacturer was the K75 provided by Cole Iron Works, but they are also not sponsoring the video. I can't believe I have to say that all the time. But it is a tool that has won a place in the shop. It's bolted to the floor and more or less permanently installed back there with dedicated air lines. And I'm finding it quite useful. I don't use it all day, every day, but when it's the right tool, it's the right tool. And there are a lot of times I will use 2 or 3 of these tools in a single day. The one that gets used almost every day is the treadle hammer. There's almost always something I need to use, a flat or a chisel, put my touch mark on, something like that, that the treadle hammer is the best of the bunch for that. The next most used tool is probably the Samac air hammer, and then I'd say it's probably that K75. Then it would be a toss-up between the hydraulic press and the Little Giant. I don't use the fly press as much as I should, mostly because I just don't think about it, and I really would like to make a lot more tooling for it. It does so much, and so much of the repetitive work I would like to do to make product for sale, the fly press would excel at. Anyways, I've talked about this long enough. I hope it provides some good information for you. I want to thank each and every one of you for stopping by to watch today's video, with a special shout out to my channel members and my Patreon patrons. Channel members receive early access to the videos, while Patreon patrons at a certain level not only receive early access, they receive the videos ad-free over on Patreon, along with occasional exclusive content over on Patreon. So if that interests you, that might be worth checking out. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, have fun, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.